Hey everybody, it's PartyElite with yet another online battle today, once more bringing the Skaven to the field. This time I take them against the Greenskins of a commander whose name would likely get me demonetized. You'll see what I mean when you see his name at the end. We begin, of course, with talk of composition and deployment, and as you can see, both sides have gone extremely wide for this battle. Let's start with my Skaven, led by Lord Skrolk, frontline consisting of a pair of Plague Monks on either flank, and these Plague Monks in the center as well, with a little gap allowing these WARPFIRE throwers right behind them to fire away with their magical fire damage capabilities here, just in case there are any Savage Orcs rushing towards us. I also have these Plague Monk sensor bearers on either flank. They are armor piercing, but also capable of causing magical damage, again, just in case there are any physically resistant Savage Orcs coming my way. And all the way at the back over here, you can see a pair of Storm Vermin with halberds protecting the Plague Claw Catapult and the Warpfire throwers in the center here from any potential charges that come in with some flanking maneuvers, some rear charges, whatever it might be. And again, that Plague Claw Catapult as well. Magical damage that I can use against any Savage Orcs. In the trees as well, you can see a pair of Skaven Slave Spears over here and a pair all the way off to the right as well. So using the trees as cover for some of these slave spears here, just in case my enemy tries to send in some Orc Boar Boy Biggins through these flanks to try and get some damage in, looking for opportunities. Let's take a look at the Greenskins. You can see they do in fact have some savagery on the field. Warzag himself is in charge on Boarback, and the front line consists of alternating Savage and non-Savage Orcs. We've got Savage Orcs, Orc Boys, Savage Orc Biggins, Orc Boys, Savage Orc Biggins again, Orc Boys, and then Savage Orcs capping it off. These guys do also have the Goblin Big Boss on Spiderback to provide some support, and we have a pair of Goblin Archers here and a pair over here, just able to fire away and cause some damage when lines meet. The Broken Tusks mob as well, able to charge through the front line or pushing for flanking opportunities, getting that anti-large and armor-piercing damage done, while on either side the Orc Boar Chariot will cause a fair bit of damage to infantry, pushing in with flanking maneuvers, and we also have the Warlord's Boys creeping through the trees, stalking forward, hoping to get some flanking opportunities as well, while you can see some initial shots coming in from the Plague Claw Catapult, trying to hurt these Goblin Archers, doing a touch of damage here and there, just trying to get rid of that range support as early as possible, and the morale damage it can cause, of course, hoping to get those guys to give up. You can see the morale is already at about 50%, and I'm just waiting for my enemy to come closer. I have the artillery advantage. You can see still firing away, trying to get some hurt in and just remove a unit from the field as early as possible. I don't want to go chasing after some Goblin Archers. Meanwhile, as the Orc Boar Chariot over here tucks in and sort of shifts back towards the corner over here, I pull my Skaven Slave Spears back ever so slightly. I want to make sure that that Orc Boar Chariot sort of commits to this situation as I send my Storm Vermin with halberds over here, and I can't actually see the Warlord's Boys over here, so I'm sitting here waiting for this Orc Boar Chariot that I saw sneak into the trees over there. Meanwhile, you can see the Goblin Archers over here have already given up on the fight, so the Plague Claw Catapult has done its job, but you can see a bit of a mistake here from my opponent actually bringing in the Foot of Gork on the Plague Claw Catapult. Now, the Foot of Gork is ideally used when a lot of units are clumped together. Over here, it does a fair bit of damage. It drops the health of the unit to about 50%, but unfortunately, it doesn't actually destroy any of the catapults. So as far as efficiency is concerned, the Plague Claw Catapult is still at full effectiveness. So a bit of a bad call. They should have waited until front lines met, and you can see over here, the Warlord's Boys actually get entangled by some of these Skaven Slave Spears. They get spotted finally, and I'm perfectly fine with sending these Skaven Slave Spears in to chase after the Warlord's Boys. These guys are capable of causing me some hassle. They have armor sundering capabilities, and I don't really want to get rear charges happening for obvious reasons. Don't want that extra morale damage, so I send in those Skaven Slave Spears just to keep those Warlord's Boys, or the Warlord's Boys, busy. Meanwhile, as the front lines are coming closer, I am taking a look at what is up against me, and I'm trying to find these Savage Orcs to make sure I fire accurately and appropriately with my Warpfire throwers. While back here, you can see the Orc Boar Chariot managed to actually circumvent my Skaven Slave Spears because I pulled them too far back, and now they are going in as I send my Storm Vermin with halberds to intercept. So you can see as that Orc Boar Chariot is kind of looking for an entry point, I'm sending the Storm Vermin with halberds in to intercept, and at the same time, I also have my Plague Claw Catapult turning around to open fire once more. As these guys are closing their gaps, you can see the Warpfire Thrower focusing in on these Savage Orc Biggins over here. I figure they're threatening, they're physically resistant, so I want to try and get some damage in there, and it does a fair bit of hurt. The Warpfire Thrower can do a fair bit of leadership damage as well, so that's always helpful against an army like the Greenskins, I find. And again, just experimenting with this build over here. So it does a fair bit of damage on the left over here as well. You can see the Warpfire Thrower just getting a touch of damage in to these Savage Orc Biggins, and now the charges go in. I get the Plague Claw Catapult firing at some of these other Goblin Archers at the same time as well, while Effigy of Degit goes down on Lord Skrolk. So good call over there, trying to cause some damage to leadership nice and early. And in here, you can see the Warlord's Boys, even though they will come out on top, I'm just keeping them busy with my Skaven Slave Spears. And again, these guys are completely expendable, so I don't actually care if this Skaven Slave Spears get taken care of. Unfortunately, though, that means this Orc Boar Chariot is able to just push right through, and I'm not actually paying attention to it, which is a big mistake on my part. Back here, meanwhile, you can see the Orc Boar Chariot as well is kind of dancing around with my Stormvermin with halberds, so I pulled them back into some safety, while in the gap over here, unfortunately, I just wasn't able to close it in time, and a beautiful charge into the Warpfire throwers by the Broken Tusks mob. So wonderfully spotted by my opponent there. Great job shutting down what would have been a very threatening unit had I taken care of it, but whoops. Meanwhile, over here, you can see I actually have some support coming in with Stand Your Ground, just trying to keep these Plague Monks alive and fighting, but Wurzag is pushing in. I hit him with the Liber Bubonicus, trying to get some damage in, while off to the right over here, I pop Pestilent Breath, doing a lot of hurt to these Savage Orc Biggins, and also getting some damage into these Orc Boys, ultimately getting them to give up on the fight. Again, just keeping an eye on a unit that would otherwise be safe from regular damage, and using magic whenever possible. You can see, though, Wurzag here is closing the gap to the Warpfire Thrower, so that's not an ideal situation. I try to send Skrulk in to try and keep Wurzag busy, and at the same time, though, you can see the Orc Boar Chariot over here has come in through the trees. It is now going to try and push in for some rear charges, while over here, this Orc Boar Chariot has been kept occupied by my Stormvermin with halberds. Unfortunately, Broken Tusk mob completely destroyed that one unit of Warpfire Throwers, and while Wurzag over here is being taken care of by Lord Skrulk, I'm sending my Warpfire Thrower up between this gap to try and get some nice shots into the backs of all of these units, into this giant clump. Unfortunately, the Orc Boar Chariot over here is pushing in, and it's going to cause some trouble for me, as to the right over here, you can see the Broken Tusks mob is being kept busy by the Skaven Slave Spears. Again, the Skaven Slave Spears are not the best unit, but I have ranked them up ever so slightly. They're not going to cause me too much trouble as far as leadership is concerned, and they're anti-large, so I might as well use them to keep some of these units occupied. Over here, meanwhile, as you can see, Wurzag has given up on the fight. He is routing, he is falling back, and unfortunately, Skrulk is just not able to keep the chase on as he gets tossed back by some of those Orc Boar Chariots. So wonderfully done there by my opponent, and you can see I'm not having a good time. These Warpfire Throwers got caught in melee, so they're giving up on the fight. These Plague Monks as well giving up on the fight, despite having Blessed with Filth to try and provide some support over here. These guys are not doing so well, especially with that Goblin Big Boss in there providing support as well. Over here on the right flank, though, you can see these Plague Monks and the Plague Monk Sense Bearers as well, closing the gap into these Goblin Archers, trying to get rid of that range support, as you can see, while back here, my Plague Claw Catapult has finally been shut down. Very effectively done by my opponent once again, finding that gap, sending in the Broken Tusks mob, eliminating the Warpfire Throwers, and then turning around swiftly and taking care of the Plague Claw Catapult. The Orc Boar Chariot as well had moved in to eliminate, or actually reduce the threat, I should say, of Lord Skrulk. And you can see this Warpfire Thrower unit as well has dropped its flag, is completely shattered, so I have lost all of my range capabilities, while off to the side over here, you can see I have the Skaven Slave Spears still keeping the, or rather, Warlord's Boys occupied. Don't care that I'm losing the fight over here. I'm just keeping that unit at bay. It's not getting any rear charges, so I'm not too concerned. And at the same time, big mistake on my part over here. I send both of these Stormvermin with halberd units chasing after the Orc Boar Chariot. And in fact, the Orc Boar Chariot shatters in just a moment's time, but I still keep chasing it. So a big mistake on my part over there. And you can see Lord Skrulk is in a bit of a tight spot here as well, trying to get him out of the situation, as the Goblin Big Boss is trying to give chase here, using Slippery to keep his speed up, and his melee defense is going to dive into Lord Skrulk, and Skrulk is in a terrible spot right now, as up front over here as well, the Plague Monk Sensor Bears are giving up on the fight, and these Plague Monks as well. With all of that focus fire coming in, their morale is extremely low, and so too is their health. Meanwhile, over here, I am taking care of these Goblin Archers with my Plague Monk Sensor Bears, as well as these Plague Monks, just hoping to take care, again, of that range support, and you can see Skrulk, again, still just dying away, and Wurzag was actually safe for the longest time. When he routed, he pulled back into the trees and stayed hidden. Ultimately, my opponent decided to pull him out and go chasing, I think, after Lord Skrulk, and it's not a terrible idea. You want to use his magical support, you want to get him in there to cause some damage when Lord Skrulk is already sort of on the ground, metaphorically speaking, but now I know that Wurzag is back on the field. Earlier, I thought I had already taken care of him. Meanwhile, you can see I pop Stand Your Ground once again in this giant clump in the center, hoping to get some support in there, hoping to keep these guys alive and fighting, and in comes another foot of Gork, and this one, again, just a little misplaced there. There are a couple of my units that will take some damage from that foot of Gork, but just not enough of a concentration to cause me any real concern. I was able to get Lord Skrulk to dodge that foot, so I'm not really worried about what happened there. But over here, you can see these Plague Monk Sensor Bearers are closing the gap towards these Goblin Archers again, hoping to shut them down, as these Goblin Archers have been taken care of. And I'm actually sending these Plague Monks in to, again, shut down these Goblin Archers that are still firing away, getting some damage done to the Plague Monk Sensor Bearers over there. To the left over here, you can see the Warlord's Boys have finally overcome the threat of one of these Skaven Slave Spears. And all the way back here, you can see these two Stormvermin with halberd units are just staring off into the distance. I guess a pretty nice view over here, but not helping me where I need them right now. And you can see, even though the Greenskins are beginning to shatter and rout here and there, I am still a little concerned, because Skrulk is very low on health, and you can see I have to be very careful about where he actually gets engaged. I use a Pestilent Breath once more. Unfortunately, not perfectly angled there, just scuffing some of these goblin archers over here, but not doing enough, as back here the Goblin Big Boss continues to give chase. I use the Liber Bubonicus just to cause some hurt over there, but unfortunately he gets a charge in and then routes, so a little bit of damage done there, and this massive clump of Greenskins just diving in on Lord Skrulk. In comes the Effigy of Dagit as well. Lord Skrulk is in a terrible situation, and I can't keep him safe from Effigy of Dagit, of course, but meanwhile over here Wurzag is being chased by some of these Plague Monks, again trying to get rid of Greenskin leadership and get it to drop while I chase all of these routing units, still trying to get all of them to turn into shatters, and ultimately you can see here Lord Skrulk has given up on the fight, and as he's trying to rout, he gets surrounded by the Orc-Boar Chariot and the Savage Orc Biggins, who are trying to eliminate him and kill him, because that does cause more morale damage. Over here though, Wurzag popping get back here to keep himself in the fight, I think, as I'm giving chase to him with some of these Plague Monks. Again, if I can get him to rout and I can keep chasing him off the field, that'll do good for me, especially since I'm just about to lose Lord Skrulk as far as his morale is concerned. Back here, meanwhile, you can see these Skaven Slave Spears continue to be willing to fight. I guess they prefer death to the whip. One of them decides to rout again immediately, so maybe I spoke too soon there. But the Warlords boys have been useless this battle. They have 169 kills, but none of those kills are actually worth anything for my opponent. And over here, once again, I can send these Skaven Slave Spears back in, so I'm very happy with how those slaves have performed to the left over there. And I finally noticed my Storm Vermin with Halberds, so I turn them around and try to get them back into the fight over here, but it is far too late. They have a long way to go. You can see Skrulk drops, and that is terrible for morale across the board for me. You can see these Skaven Slave Spears here are beginning to give up on the fight. We've got one of them routing already, the other one very low on morale. Despite coming out on top in the current engagement, they took a fair bit of morale damage, and you can see they are very close to routing, and there it goes. They do give up on the fight. These Plague Monks as well, they get hit by the Orc-Boar Chariot, giving up on the fight as well, while the Plague Monks over here trying to chase after whatever I can, hoping to turn all of these routes into shatters. You can see the Goblin Archers over here just sitting there looking pretty. I need to go in and charge after them, and I notice they're right there, and they're actually willing to fight, so I turn my Plague Monk Sensor Bearers around and hope to eliminate just another unit, trying to get a mass rout going on over here. You can see Wurzag now on the route, but I maintain a chase over here. These Plague Monks are hoping to get him to completely shatter, or at least die, maybe leave the field, whatever it might be, to maximize the amount of morale damage being done. And you can see I'm trying to regroup a little bit here. I have lost a lot of my army. I have very little left. There is a Chariot on the other side of the field. There's an Orc-Boar boy unit as well, the Broken Tusks Mob. We've got a Goblin Big Boss and the Savage Orc Biggin. So a bit of a precarious situation. I have some Plague Monks off to the side over here, but I'm worried that I might lose them in a moment's time. The Warlords boys have turned around against some of these Plague Monks as well, so I'm a little concerned about what's happening to the left over here, and I have to be very careful about what's happening in the center over here. These Storm Vermin with Halberds have finally come back into the fray, and I'm glad to have them at basically full health as well. So maybe I could have lied and said I was keeping them in reserve on purpose, but that is most certainly not the case. I try to close the gap here to the Broken Tusks Mob, trying to prevent any potential rear charges, but unfortunately they are, of course, much faster than my rats on foot, and the Chariot as well is a cause for concern. As that's happening, you can see the rest of the field. I have managed to chase Wurzag off, so these Plague Monks are able to turn around and get involved once again. And again, off in the distance here, all of these routes have been slowly turning to shadows. This one unit of Goblin Archers is willing to fight once more, but I don't think my opponent is looking there right now. They could have been turned around to fire into some of my Plague Monks over here, or even better, pulled back all the way over here, but they are quite far away, and I do have an opportunity to come out on top. And you can see over here, as I give chase to these Broken Tusks Mob, I ultimately decide that this is a futile attempt, and I decide to fall back, while up front over here, you can see the Goblin Big Boss diving in, getting a nice charge into the Storm Vermin with Halberds. Unfortunately for him, he is on a Spider, and he is a large unit, so these Storm Vermin with Halberds, after recovering from that charge, they will be alright. But in comes a Chariot, in come the Savage Orc Biggins as well, so a bit of a tight spot for me as the Goblin Big Boss pops Slippery to keep his melee defense up. You can see I've got these guys all pushing in, piling in towards the Orc-Boar Chariot, the Goblin Big Boss, as well as the Savage Orc Biggins there, hoping to get a massive surround, because I am losing the engagement right now with the Storm Vermin with Halberds because of that charge from the Orc-Boar Chariot. At the same time, I notice we have the Broken Tusk Mob giving a charge here as well, and you can see I kind of give an order to split apart just so I can get a surround on the Broken Tusk Mob as well. As I'm closing the gap to the Chariot, though, I notice that I am coming out on top. The Orc-Boar Chariot is about to give up, so I turn around with the Storm Vermin with Halberd and get a charge instead on the Broken Tusk Mob instead, hoping to hold them in place, get a fair bit of damage done, maybe get some morale damage in as well, as they charge right through, and a Pyrrhic victory for my Skaven. Now, I anticipated at least some degree of Savage Orc presence, and so I kept Warpfire throwers in the hopes of causing some serious damage, and I made sure to bring Pestilent Breath, some Plague Monk Sensor Bearers. Unfortunately, the Warpfire throwers and Skrulk both got engaged and destroyed relatively early. Despite that, I was able to come out on top by keeping some of my enemy's units occupied by Skaven slave throwaway units and by regrouping before the final act. Again, I could claim that those storm vermin with halberds were kept in reserve for just that purpose, but that would be a lie. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content. Online battles and Total Breakdown will bring you a constant flow of tactical analysis and advice, and we're always keeping an eye out for the future of Total War as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to meeting you on the battlefield.